Alright, how's it going everybody? Combo here. As you probably saw in the thumbnail or in the title, or maybe just what you're looking at in front of your face here, today we have a tier list with every single gadget here in Season 6 of the Finals. I've had a lot of requests to make this video, and I think it's really important that I do, as this season we actually didn't get any new gadgets. However, we did see quite a few balancing changes to a few gadgets that were struggling. So with that being said, usually I like to go and explain kind of what every tier is, which I'm still going to do here, but we're going to be super brief here in the beginning. S tier, right? Probably needs a nerf, best in slot. A tier, I call it the gold standard, means like this is, in my opinion, A tier is where every gadget should be. Every gadget should have a scenario where it's good. However, there shouldn't be a gadget where you use it and, you know, you're hurting yourself by using it. I do think every gadget should have its own strengths and weaknesses. However, A tier I think is where it's well-rounded but not too strong. B tier, you know, has some really good upsides, maybe some not so great downsides. C tier probably needs some help. Very niche, I would also like to call it in this tier. You know, there's one situation where maybe this gadget is absolutely fantastic, but the majority of the time it's not great. And D tier means, alright, buff it. It's terrible. I don't believe any gadget is truly F tier. Same thing with the weapons, and that's because, you know, Embark does a really good job at balancing for the most part. However, as we'll see today, there are still a few outliers in my opinion. But with that being said, I'm going to quit yapping here in the intro. Hopefully you guys enjoy the video. Of course, I want this to be a productive video. I don't want people to sit in the comments and argue. I know I can't stop you, right? You're mostly, you know, grown adults, or maybe you're not, and that's why you can't argue yet. But at the end of the day, try to be respectful to other people's opinion. But also, I'm not an idiot, and I understand this is the internet, so who fucking cares, man? Just, you know, don't be stupid. So, that's all I got. Let's get into the tier list and rank these dang gadgets. Alrighty, starting things out at number 1, we have the Anti-Gravity Cube. Now this has been a pretty strong gadget for quite some time. It has quite a bit of diversity in the ways that you can use it. So for example, you can use it as a heavy to maybe circumvent your low ability to move upwards. So you can just throw it down, climb a building. Maybe you want to throw it underneath the floor. You don't even need line of sight with this thing to actually elevate a cash out and maybe stop people from getting it. This is also really good at blocking off doorways. There's a lot of applications. However, it did recently get buffed. The hitbox of it was actually reduced, as well as the cooldown was also reduced. So in my opinion, I don't think it's quite A tier where it stands now. There are a lot of instances where, of course, it is good, but there's never a time where I'm looking at my loadout and I'm like, damn, I really need the anti-gravity cube. So as it stands right now, I'd say it's a solid B tier. I think if I were to buff this thing, and this might sound crazy, I think potentially giving the heavy 2 charges of it with a shorter duration of the cube itself. Because that's the biggest thing with this thing. You know, they did, of course, once again, reduce the cooldown of the gadget. However, it sits there, and most of the time you're not sitting in an anti-gravity cube for more than like 10 seconds. So if it were me personally, I would split the duration of how long the cube lasts into 2 charges, which would give the player a lot more versatility in using it and make it feel more impactful on the map. But as it stands now, anti-gravity cube, I think, is B tier. Alright, next up we have the APS Turret, which also did get buffed this season, which is great. However, we're also in a meta where people aren't chucking Frag Grenades all the time because, as we'll get into later, Frag Grenades did receive a pretty substantial nerf last season. And for that reason, I'm going to have to stick the APS in B tier. It is still really good at those defensive plays and, you know, guarding off people who like to just spam projectiles. However, also, we're in a meta now where it's pretty easy to break things even if you don't have explosives. So for example, KS-23, minigun, sledgehammer, even the CL-40, if you know what you're doing, you can avoid this pretty easily and break the floor underneath it. It also can only get rid of so many projectiles at a time, and it does have a pretty long cooldown. Once again, we're in a meta where people like to get in your face and not necessarily camp. You know, a lot of the weapons we're seeing used right now, XP-54, Cerberus, SA-1216, things that the APS turret unfortunately does not help with, so for that reason, I'm going to stick the APS in B tier. Alright, next up we have the Barricade, and this right here, this is a very, very powerful gadget on the heavy. I'm going to stick this in A tier right now. This thing has a ton of health. For most classes, to include light and medium, there aren't many ways to necessarily get rid of it if a heavy is using this to block a doorway. What a lot of people will also do is combine the Barricade with Goo to create essentially impenetrable doorways that people can't get in. This is also really good for, of course, playing cover because it's a Barricade. You can peek in and out and deal some damage. It also blocks explosions in front of it as well as flashbangs, so you can use this to actually react in time to counter things like flashbangs, RPGs, you can use this to block them. And I know that is a pretty high skill application, but it's not quite as difficult as you may think if you give it some practice. Overall, once again, this is a very powerful gadget. Essentially, when you put down a barricade, most people aren't trying to destroy it. When you put this thing down, you're basically forcing your enemy to change the way they are playing, which in my opinion is definitely grounds for an A tier pick. Alright, next up we have the Breach Charge, and this is a pretty good gadget overall. It did receive quite a few buffs at the start of Season 6. You can toss them out faster, they do a little bit more damage, and they also have a shorter time to arm, which is all really cool. However, I think the biggest downside to the Breach Charge is just what it is in essence. Personally, right, when I play light, I am not playing light to be a demolitions expert. And also, you can try to use these things aggressively, and I have seen it done successfully. However, the explosion radius and the damage on these is just not high enough. Personally, if I were to give these a buff, I would maybe increase the speed at which you get them back, or maybe, as crazy as this sounds, maybe give the light another one so you can have 4. As crazy as that sounds, but as it stands now, I think they're B tier. B for Breach Charge. I think they could definitely be better. But as it stands now, right, they're not really terrible, but there's not that great upside to the point where it's like, oh man, I need to put on Breach Charge, but also you're not necessarily hurting yourself too much by using them. It all comes down to really what you want on the light build. Okay, next up, we have the C4 on the heavy, and I'm going to stick this right into A tier. I don't think C4 is quite S tier, however, there's a lot of things that make the C4 super good. 1, the damage on this is absolutely insane. 2, the radius on this is absolutely insane. And additionally, you can actually stack 2 of them. Even though you get 1 charge, Embark made it so you can still have 2 down at the same time, which is really good for denying areas. Also, once again, on the heavy, they allow you to be far away from a target, still deal damage. Maybe you're regenerating your health and you chuck one of these underneath a cash out. I've never had an issue, right? If I put a C4 on the floor underneath a cash out and I detonate it, that is the easiest way to deny a cash out in this game. I've noticed some people, if they're smart, they'll actually check underneath a cash out if they know the team they're fighting has a heavy, because so many heavies like to do this. But overall, once again, the damage on it is insane on the C4. It's really good for team play. Even in modes like TDM and Power Shift, right? It's not difficult to bait people around corners with this and deal some damage. And another really niche thing you have with the C4 is what people are calling the pocket sand, which is where you throw it and immediately quick melee, which is good for finishing targets off at a distance and can kind of save you in some kind of pinch situations. So for that reason, C4, very versatile, and I would say definitely an A tier gadget. Alright, Data Reshaper. This is crazy. This is perhaps the craziest nerf I've ever seen in the finals. I know why they did it. So they actually reduced the charges on the Data Reshaper. It may not have been the charges, but I know they did nerf something with the amount that you can actually reshape with this gadget. And for that reason, I gotta stick it in C tier. I know why they did it, mostly because in Power Shift, people were spamming red canisters, and you know, in a team setting, if you have 3 people with a Data Reshaper, you can get like so many barrels and canisters. Like, it's actually insane. However, in a competitive setting, there isn't a situation in something like Ranked or World Tour where, once again, I'm thinking to myself, God, I need a Data Reshaper. It is really good at, you know, putting canisters all over a cash out. You can get rid of turrets with it. You can get rid of other mines and things of that nature. And that's really good. However, you can do the same thing with your gun when it comes to turrets. And turrets aren't even necessarily that popular all the time. Most mediums I see are using DMAT or the heal beam. And also, if you want to get rid of mines, shoot them or throw down a frag. It's really not that difficult. Running in with the Data Reshaper and not having your gun out is putting you at a bigger disadvantage. And I love all of you, but I don't want to see a comment saying, well, you can get rid of somebody who shoots an RPG at you. I'll pay you money if you can do that in a ranked game and just swap over and get rid of an RPG, because if you're fighting a team that's good, they're not going to look you in the eyes and say, okay, are you ready? And then shoot the RPG at you. That's not how it works. So for that reason, Data Reshaper for me is going to be in C tier. Alright, next up we have Defib, and unfortunately, even after all the nerfs, man, I still gotta put Defib in S tier if your teammates know what they're doing. Now, the Defib is kind of a double-edged sword. I think a lot of low-skill players, and I don't mean this in a mean way, you can watch my streams, you see it happen all the time, don't have the game sense, essentially, to know when to use this thing optimally. My rule of thumb, if you're going to use defib, only use it in a situation where you would have enough time to revive your teammate normally. Granted, there are exceptions. However, what I see happen a lot is people will run into an open field, defib their buddy, they get shot because they have no gun out and they're trying to defib them, then their teammate pops up and they immediately go down. Also, defibbing lights. I'm telling you, you come back with 75 health. There's so many weapons in the game that can take you out in like, a fraction of a second. So it doesn't always make sense in my opinion. However, it cannot be denied that having the ability to basically circumvent one of the most punishing factors in the finals, which is the long revive time, and immediately get your friend back into the fight, especially if you're using a heal beam, cannot be overstated. Additionally, you also get that invulnerability as you're getting defibbed, which in some cases, if the person getting defibbed has good movement, is basically a surefire way for them to get away. So for that reason, once again, I don't think this shocks anybody. Defib is still very powerful, and for me personally, I believe it to be an S tier gadget. Alright, next up we have the Dome Shield on the Heavy. I'm going to stick this right in S tier. I don't think this is a shock to anybody. Dome Shield has been good forever. I mean, you place it down, your enemies can't shoot you, you can shoot them. If you're fighting a melee user, you can actually wiggle in and out of the Dome Shield and cancel the damage they do with their melee weapon. It has an advantage over even the specialization, which is the Mesh Shield, because you can shoot when you put it down. You can use this to res teammates and put down the Dome Shield. You can use it to block cash outs. I mean, literally, there is not a scenario where it is a bad idea to use a Dome Shield. I mean, this is good in every single scenario. Of course, yeah, it doesn't have a ton of health, but, in a situation where you're fighting another team, if they're not team shotting your Dome Shield, they're not going to have enough time to shoot it down and then kill you if you're getting a revive, for example. So for that reason, once again, I don't think it's a shocker to anybody. I don't think there's a single build on Heavy that would not benefit by using the Dome Shield. And in a lot of scenarios, I feel like you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage if you're not running this. I know I've been yelled at by teammates in the past, but also I just play the game how I want. But in a competitive setting, I do understand why people think you should be running it. This is definitely a must pick. So for me, definitely going to be an S tier gadget. All right, next up we have the RPG. Now, before, I would have put this thing in A tier. However, after the nerf to the Frag Grenade, which was truly the competition for the RPG, of course, the self-damage on this is still very high. It doesn't do as much damage as it used to. Definitely doesn't one-shot lights anymore. However, the versatility on the RPG is absolutely insane. Immediately destroying walls, really good at finishing targets off at a distance. The area damage on this is still very powerful. And for those reasons, man, I gotta stick the RPG in S tier as well. A lot of really good gadgets on the Heavy. The biggest downside to the RPG, two things actually. First, super long cooldown. That is one thing the Frag Grenade still has over it as part of its advantage to using the Frag Grenade. And as well, the Frag Grenade also does more damage. And the other weakness, and this could just be a skill issue, but I think we've all been in this scenario if you use the RPG a lot, when you pull it back out, you actually have to reload it, which I've seen so many times. People swap over to their RPG and they go to shoot somebody and then turns out, whoops, you didn't reload it. And now you're sitting there and you look really stupid, and then they panic swap back to their weapon, and by that time, usually they die. But, those two weaknesses, of course, can be circumvented by good positioning and, of course, just being aware of your cooldowns. So for those reasons, once again, RPG, you shoot it, it's really hard to miss, good area damage, destroys walls, basically everything you would want in a game like the Finals. So for me, RPG is back in S tier, where it was before. Alright, next up we have the Explosive Mine. Now you can get this on the medium and the heavy. I'm going to stick this in B tier for now. I do think there are better options. I think out of the three mines, not including the glitch trap because it's kind of its own thing, Explosive Mine I think is probably the worst of the three. The damage on it is okay. The one advantage you do have is you can have two down at the same time, and the cooldown on it is actually quite quick. However, not being able to one-shot lights like you could in the past has of course brought this thing down, and being able to store two charges, as we saw with the Frag Grenade that recently got nerfed, makes a huge difference in your gameplay. Granted, there are some combos that you can use with the Explosive Mine that are pretty good. Of course, you can do the Pocket Sand that I talked about before, where you throw it out and quick melee it. However, for some reason with the mines, it tends to be a little bit more inconsistent, but that is an option you have. It's always good to put this on a cash out and of course try to deny area. But the the big disadvantage of the Explosive Mine, and maybe this is just me, and in some senses all the mines, something about the explosive mine, it is so easy to spot. And of course, right, it comes down to where you're placing it, and that does make a big difference. However, once again, the damage isn't great. I rarely run into these anymore, and if I do, it's a calculated risk, we'll call it, where it's like, if I see it and I have to run through it to get away or to do something, there's ways you can circumvent the damage on it. Essentially, the speed at which you run into it will reduce the damage. So if I'm playing on light and I evasive dash over it, if you spam 2 dashes, you can actually take less damage. So once again, there's a lot of ways to deny the explosive mine. Don't think it's quite as good as it used to be. And also, once it's gone, it's gone. There's nothing lingering, which is the big reason why the other mines are better. So for me, explosive mine is going to be in B tier. All right, next up we have the Flashbang. And this one might be surprising for a lot of people. I feel like the Flashbang over time, people have slowly kind of learned to respect it. I think this thing, when it first came out, was like D tier. It was like, why would you use the Flashbang when you have 2 frag grenades or even a gas grenade or anything like that? But the Frag Grenade has been steadily getting buffed over time to now. Flashbangs are really strong and fantastic for denying area. You still get 2 charges. The cooldown on them is basically non-existent. The radius on them has been increased multiple times, so for that reason, I'm actually going to stick the Flashbang in A tier. Of course, there are skilled ways that you can avoid them. However, a good Flashbang user is going to throw Flashbangs in a way to where you don't know where they are until they're right on top of you. I show this off in my video a lot, but by simply holding down the throw on the Flashbang, you can actually see where it's going to explode and at what distance, which is super powerful, especially because, if you want to engage on an area and you want to block off the enemy sightline, chucking a Flashbang will 90% of the time force your enemy to look away, which will allow you to reposition. Another thing that I love doing with the Flashbang, it's so powerful, especially on light and heavy, is if you're getting chased by somebody, throw a Flashbang at your feet and run over it. That obviously meaning it won't flash you, but it'll force the enemy to look away, which will of course, make them break line of sight. Or if they want to keep shooting you, they're going to get flashbanged and then they can't see anything. So for those reasons, Flashbang, super powerful. Highly recommend you give it a try. If you want to be that guy, please don't flashbang your teammates. I know that sucks, but kind of just is what it is. It's how you balance it. But for those reasons, Flashbang for me is going to be A tier. Okay, next up we got the Frag Grenade. I'm going to stick this one right in A tier. Maybe a hot take there. Frag Grenade is still really good for denying area. It still does a lot of damage. The cooldown, of course, I think could be a little bit shorter, seeing as you only have 1. They did reduce the damage on it, which is unfortunate, but I still think the Frag Grenade, out of all of the throwables in the game, I think this has the highest skill ceiling. It's good for so many things, right? If you combine it with a flammable barrel, you can blow up a wall, you can blow up enemy mines. If you get chased by somebody, throw down a frag at your feet. It is like the ultimate turn-on tool. They're difficult to see, so if somebody throws a frag grenade, a lot of people will maybe run the wrong way, and they'll kind of panic. Also, when people hear it, it kind of makes them panic even more because they're like, oh god, where's this frag at? Once again, the group area damage is very good. At those longer ranges, you can see this on stream, it's not too difficult to actually snipe people with frag grenades and, catch them off guard. People are like, why am I taking all this damage? And then turns out it was a frag grenade. So for those reasons, once again, even though we no longer have 2 frag grenades, before, of course, the frag was like top S tier, probably the best gadget in the game, I think people are overreacting at least a little bit on the nerf. So for me, I still think the frag is the best throwable overall. But, let me know what you guys think in the comments, because I feel like this is a pretty divisive subject. All right, next up we have the gas grenade. I'm going to put the gas grenade in C tier, and I know that might be kind of a hot take here, but hear me out for a minute. So, in a game where fire is becoming more common, we have things like the Cerberus. Pyro grenades are a lot more popular right now because a lot of people are switching from the Frag Grenade to the Pyro Grenade. We also have flammable barrels, the flamethrower, once again, the list goes on. But all of these things directly counter the gas grenade. And we're going to talk about going further up the list. There's another gadget that does everything the gas grenade does, other than the throw distance, which there is a way to circumvent as well, just in a better sense. So for me, once again, I think if they were to buff the gas grenade, I don't think you should necessarily get 2 charges of it, because I do think that would be a little bit obnoxious. But the biggest thing this thing needs, if you're going to keep the gas grenade at 1 charge, and you're going to keep the gas mine, which we're going to talk about next, at 2 charges, the cloud on the gas grenade simply needs to be bigger. It doesn't matter if it lasts longer, because once again, you can counter it with fire, which is not difficult in this meta. If you're gonna use the gas grenade, you need to make the cloud bigger and make it feel more impactful, because right now, it feels like you just took a gas canister and threw it, and it just kind of, I don't know, it doesn't really feel like it does much anymore, and I definitely think it needs some help. So for me, gas grenade is going to be a C tier pick. Alright, next up we have the gas mine, and this one might be one of the more controversial picks for the video, but I'm going to do my best to explain why I believe this. I think the gas mine is an A tier pick, for 2 reasons. 1, you get 2 charges, which is already really good. 2, it's a mine, which means you throw it down and it stays there until you throw down another one, which forces people to adapt to the gameplay. Essentially what I'm saying is, if they see a mine, they have to shoot it. And the difference between this one and the explosive mine is, okay, you shoot it, but now there's a giant gas cloud there. And unless you have fire, which is another step, so you have to do 2 different things to get rid of this, most people shoot it and then run away or try to find an alternate area. Another thing the gas mine is good for, if you didn't know this, you can actually hit people through walls with gas. And what I like to do on stream is I'll throw down gas mines, put it on a wall, and then shoot it and damage people through walls. And because you have 2 charges, it's essentially like having 2 gas grenades. This is also really good for area denial. Once again, if I'm not trying to be aggressive, if I throw one of these down and somebody's chasing me, I'll leave a frag grenade on top of it, which just does so much damage. I mean, once again, look at the streams or my videos. This is in my most popular build. It was actually in my Pike video. This is the loadout that I use. And a lot of people will say, well, Combo, you know, you said you can throw the gas grenade further. How do you throw this further? Super easy. Literally just put down a jump pad. If you need to throw the gas mine further for any reason, just throw down a jump pad, bounce the gas mine off it, and it's going to go a lot further. So you can even circumvent that weakness, which is something we talked about with the gas grenade. So for all those reasons, once again, maybe this is kind of a weird pick. For me, gas mine, definitely A tier. I think it's good where it is. I don't really think it needs nerfed. Maybe that's just me coping. But overall, definitely a powerful pick, and one you should give a try. But definitely let me know what you think on this one in the comments. Alright, next up we have the Gateway. I'm going to stick this one right in S tier. I don't think this one needs too much explanation. So, first thing, this is the best movement gadget in the entire game, I think hands down. It's good for juking targets. You can easily transport a cash box or your entire team. This gives your entire team a movement boost. So if you have a light with 2 heavies, those heavies are now moving as fast as that light can, assuming the light is nice enough to leave a portal for the heavies to catch up with them. This is also really good for, of course, stealing cash outs or getting in and out, and maybe, for example, right, maybe your enemy has an area lockdown with like barricades and goo. If you shoot one of those goo clouds, chuck in the gateway, and then throw some breach charges, or maybe your heavy throws C4 through that portal, you have, you've effectively, broken into your enemy's base and destroyed their defense, because maybe you blow up the floor to where the cash box is. And once again, it's just so safe. I mean, the only counterplay to the gateway is just when you see it, maybe camp it. But even then, if your enemy knows you're doing that, they just throw another gadget through there, and then you have to run away. Then the enemy comes through. Once again, the gateway is just so safe. It's good at dueling. It's good at objectives. It's great for movement. It benefits the entire team. And for all those reasons, gateway for me is going to be S tier. Alright, next up we have the Glitch Grenade. And I have seen the Glitch Grenade get a little bit more love. It did get a change at the start of Season 6, where now it detonates a little bit sooner. However, personally, right, I still don't think the Gateway is that, or the Gateway, I still don't think the Glitch Grenade is that great. So for me, I'm going to stick it in B tier. I think the biggest weakness of the Glitch Grenade is, the explosion radius is pretty decent on it, but this is a skill shot, right? Like, the Glitch Grenade is pretty difficult to hit, especially on good players. Of course, you can chuck it through, but glitching a player, it is good, and I love me some glitch barrels, but for that same reason, if I absolutely need to glitch somebody, and I know that maybe the enemy team is using a bunch of dome shields, and I need to counter that, and that is the biggest advantage of the Glitch Grenade, is it directly counters the dome shield, as well as people who like to use defib. But overall, it is difficult in the times that you need it. I don't think they warrant you to have it all the time. Once again, glitch barrels do exist, and they do the same thing. I also think they do it a little bit better sometimes, because they detonate immediately. I don't know, this might be kind of a hot take. I could see the argument for Glitch Grenade being an A tier, but for me personally, I don't see a lot of top players running it right now, and I do think there are better options for light, other than the Glitch Grenade. So for that reason, of course, once again, let me know what you think about this, but for me, I think Glitch Grenade is going to be B tier. Alright, next up we have the Glitch Trap. And in my opinion, I think the Glitch Trap is just a slightly better version of the Glitch Grenade. So for me, Trap's going to go in A tier. The big reason is these things are annoying to shoot. Maybe it's just me, but mid-gunfight, if I get hit by a Glitch Trap, rather than sit there and try to shoot it, because usually when people are putting down Glitch Traps, they're pretty close to them, I just run away. Because especially if I'm playing light and I'm using something like Evasive Dash, if I get hit by a Glitch Trap, my entire gameplay loop has been disrupted. Also, really good against Invis players. If you hate Invis, use the freaking Glitch Trap, or another gadget that we'll talk about in the future. Overall though, the area denial on these are crazy, they have a pretty short cooldown, they're annoying to shoot, and once again, they benefit the entire team, because taking away abilities from other players, so they can't use their specializations or their gadgets, it's really big. And the difference between this one and the Glitch Grenade, this isn't a skill shot. You literally just chuck it down and immediately profit. So for that reason, I think Glitch Trap is going to be an A tier pick. Alright, next up we have the Goo Grenade. I think this overall, I think the Goo Grenade is the most versatile gadget in the entire game. So for me, maybe a hot take, gonna stick it in S tier. Let me explain all the uses for the Goo, maybe you'll see why at the end of this. It's good for movement. It's good for being aggressive. You can ensnare targets in Goo to make them waste shots and lose duels. You can use it to defend areas. You can use it to spread flames. You can use it to trap enemies. You can use it to block jump pads. I mean, quite literally, there is not a single instance in this game where having Goo would be a bad thing. You can use it to escape. Once again, the list goes on. Maybe this is a hot take. I do think there's definitely a learning curve to being really good with Goo. But overall, man, I mean, I think it's kind of hard to argue that Goo is good. Oh, another one. The cooldown on these are super short, and you get 2 of them. I mean, once again, what's there not to like about Goo? So for those reasons, especially if you have 3 people on your team using them, absolutely bonkers. Kind of interrupted myself there. For those reasons, once again, Goo Grenades, super powerful, and for me, gonna have to stick them right where they belong, in S tier. Alright, next up we have the Gravity Vortex. This came at the start of Season 5, and once again, I love me some Gravity Vortex. However, gonna stick it in B tier. This is a pretty difficult gadget to really take full advantage of. Of course, it did receive some changes in Season 6 that have made it a little bit more consistent. However, I still think this gadget overall is kind of niche. Most builds in the game have some way to escape it. Of course, Heavy has Charge and Slam, Light has Grapple and Evasive Dash, and also the pull on this thing really just is not that strong. It is good at stopping cash outs, I will say that. It also pairs really good with things like Frag Grenades, Goo Grenades, Gas Mines, Gas Nades, really anything that does a lot of area damage. You can also combine it with barrels. They did take away something that kind of hurt my feelings a little bit. At the start of Season 5, you were able to combine the Gravity Vortex with the Evasive Dash and throw it really far. However, Embark has unfortunately, gotten rid of that, which I think is kind of silly. But I digress. Definitely not as strong as it could be. I think if Embark were to make this thing better, as crazy as it might sound, maybe give it 2 charges. But even then, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe just increase the pull radius, but that might also make it too strong. I don't know a great way to balance this, but as it stands currently, what I do know is it needs a little bit of help. It's not terrible, but once again, probably not the best option that you have on the light. Alright, next up we have the jump pad. I mean, this one is so fun. The nice thing about the jump pad is I can use the enemy team's jump pad. So even when I'm not the one using it, or my team isn't the people using it, I still get benefited. But jokes aside, I do think the jump pad is going to be S tier. It's great for movement. It's great for chaining movement. Maybe one of your teammates is running a zipline, for example. They put down the zipline. I have the jump pad. I jump off that zipline, put the jump pad on the ground, and the movement you get on this is absolutely insane. Also, for all my movement people out there, there's always some crazy jump pad tech going around. I know that's probably not fair to rank it higher based on some crazy tech that's currently happening. But once again, jump pad has a lot of skill expression. I show this off in my videos a lot too. This is one of my main gadgets. I use it aggressively too. So if I have a melee player that's trying to attack me, sometimes I'll put down the jump pad to kind of disrupt them. This is really good against sledgehammer players, sword players especially, because they'll be using evasive dash usually. So they'll go to dash at you, I put down a jump pad, and then they go flying across the map. I've even gotten a few kills doing this. But once again, jump pad, similar to Goo, there's not a situation where it's bad. You can also use it to bounce cash outs around, which is a whole nother thing, and it also benefits the entire team. So for those reasons, I think it's pretty clear to see that jump pad is definitely an A tier pick. Alright, next up we have the Lockbolt Launcher. And this thing, let me tell you, this thing has seen a huge glow up since it came out in Season 5. And for me, I'm going to stick this thing in A tier. I think the biggest change that made a huge difference this season is, or really it was last season, the fact that when you shoot this thing down now, you actually deal 5 damage. I know that sounds kind of silly, but that makes a lot of kill combos that weren't possible in the past, possible now. Good example being with the KS-23. If you hit somebody with a Lockbolt, it actually takes 1 less shot to kill them. So for example, with the light, if I hit you with a Lockbolt, pull you in with the winch, shoot quick melee, they're dead. That didn't happen in the past. Also, the range on the Lockbolt is insane, and being able to basically cancel somebody's movement entirely with this thing is super strong. Also, these things are hard to shoot. Like, they're not hard to shoot as in like they're small targets, but they have a lot of health. And mid gunfight, if you get hit with a Lockbolt and the entire enemy team is pushing you, yeah, you're dead. Like, there's just nothing you can do. Like, you are just dead. Unless you have something like, a good example, the CO-40 actually counters the Lockbolt pretty hard because you don't really have to aim at it, and maybe you can hit the enemy team while they're pushing you. But overall, Lockbolt is really good. Not a ton of counterplay if you're playing with a team, and God forbid, there's 2 people on the enemy team that have a Lockbolt, and they can completely just negate your ability to move. So for those reasons, really happy to see it. I love using it. The cooldown is a little long, and reloading it can be annoying, but overall, Lockbolt really powerful, and I would definitely say, after its buffs, it's an A tier gadget. Alright, next up we have the skill button, or the Vanishing Bomb. I'm going to stick this one right in S tier. Having the ability to have both invisibility and the evasive dash on the light is super powerful, and get this, you can also give it to your teammates. The cooldown on this is super short, you can give it to your teammates. Invis is just freaking obnoxious, like, I don't know how to put it, man. Invis is like the ultimate no-skill button. It's easy for positioning. It also counters Guardian turrets. If you put on Invis, turrets can't see you, which is like a super big advantage. And overall, once again, there's nothing more obnoxious in this game than an Invis light. And for that reason, I don't think this is a shocker. Vanishing Bomb for me is gonna be S tier. Alright, next up we have the Pyro Mine. And the Pyro Mine is similar to the Gas Mine, so I'm going to stick this one right in A tier. The Pyro Mine, on top of the Gas Mine, the other advantage it has, this is the most damaging mine in the entire game. With the Gas Mine, if you throw it down and somebody walks over it, they don't take, I don't believe, they take damage for just stepping on it. The Pyro Mine they do, and then the fire goes down. And fire, as opposed to gas, is a lot more difficult to actually get rid of because you need smoke. Most people are not running smoke grenades. I have seen more people using them than in the past, which is cool to see. However, fire does a ton of damage. It's great for blocking off areas. It lasts a good amount of time. And once again, man, having 2 charges with these is absolutely insane. You can also pair these with the flamethrower for a ton of damage. It's a really good combo. I highly recommend you give it a try. I showed it off in my flamethrower video. But because of all those things, and the fact that I think the Pyro Mine, just overall, once again, there's not a situation where you're really hurting yourself. Of course, you can shoot them, and they don't one-shot people unless you're a light. I think sometimes you can get one-shot by them. I don't quite think the rest here. I do think the other options on the heavy sometimes are a little bit better overall. But once again, there's really not, too many situations where using the Pyro Mine is going to be hurting you. So once again, for me, Pyro Mine, definitely an A tier gadget. Alright, next up we have the Zipline. I'm going to stick this one right in A tier. I don't think the Zipline is quite as good as the jump pad for a couple reasons. One, I think the Zipline is a little easier to shoot targets on, so if an enemy team is using a Zipline, I do know there's tech that people can do to make yourself a little bit more difficult to hit on a Zipline. Even then, I usually don't have too much trouble actually hitting people. Additionally, Ziplines can of course be used by the enemy team, and I think they get more value out of them than jump pads. You can't pick them up once you put them down, which is a big disadvantage and something the jump pad has over it. I believe the cooldown on the zipline is also a little bit longer than the jump pad. I could be wrong on that. Please correct me if so in the comment section. I know you guys don't hesitate to. And also because at the end of the day, right, I think the jump pad is more versatile and you have more room for skill expression, if you will, more advanced movement tech. The zipline, there's really not a ton to it. One thing I've seen people do is they'll put a zipline in front of a cash box, for example, or a cash out rather, and it'll force people to use the zipline instead of taking the cash out. But, you know, you could also just blow it up. And most of the time when there is a cash out, people are chucking mines and throwing explosives, so it just gets destroyed anyways. It does pair pretty good with the dual blades and riot shield, but neither of those weapons are necessarily meta, so I don't think it elevates it to a point where, you know, it goes into S tier. Still very good though, definitely not hurting yourself by using it, but I do think the jump pad is better, hence why for me, Zipline is going to be A tier. Alright, next up we have the Pyro Grenade. This thing can be really good. It can do a lot of damage. You can also hit people through walls with it. If you want a really good baseline understanding of how to use the Pyro Grenade, I made a video on it. I'm really proud of it. So go watch that if you want to see what I'm talking about here. I'm not going to talk too much on it. I think the biggest weakness of the Pyro Grenade and the way Embark could buff it is you don't really get an advantage other than maybe another like 15 damage if you hit somebody directly. The biggest advantage of the Pyro Grenade is that it's easy to use. It's kind of a noob trap in the community right now. If you throw it and you hit somebody in the face, yeah, they take some good damage. But in my opinion, if you hit somebody with a Pyro Grenade, I think it should do bonus damage, personally, right? If you hit somebody in the face with a Pyro Grenade and it did like 100 damage or something crazy, boom, S tier. But the fact that you only get one of them, the cooldown takes a pretty long time, and it's pretty easy to get away from. Personally, I don't think it does enough damage, and I don't think there are enough situations to warrant using it. Of course, you can get rid of gas, but there's also a lot of things that get rid of gas in this game. And if you're so concerned, if you just hate gas, use the Flamethrower. Use the Cerberus. Don't use the Pyro Grenade. Also, I still think the Frag is better even after the nerf. You can fight me on that one, just my personal opinion. But I see a lot of people use this now after the Frag nerf, and that was its biggest competition. So, of course, let me know in the comments about this one. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can persuade me to start running Pyro instead of Frag, but we'll see. Alright guys, let me know what you think about this one in the comments. Alright, next up we have the Tracking Dart. And although this is one of my favorite gadgets in the entire game, I'm going to do my best not to be biased here. I do think the Tracking Dart needs more help. Unfortunately, the Tracking Dart does suffer from the fact that it can be somewhat difficult to hit people with it. It is hit scan, and it does have a really good hip fire. However, even after the buff that gave it a longer tracking duration at the start of Season 6, unfortunately, the Tracking Dart it just gets overshadowed by things like proximity sensors, sonar grenades. They just don't require as much skill. Of course, when you do hit somebody, you get a lot of information. And there's also a glitch where if you hit somebody with a Tracking Dart, sometimes they get revealed permanently for the rest of the match, which I've had happen to me and I've also done to other people. That's pretty frustrating. Please fix that, Embark, because yeah, that shouldn't be a thing. But besides the point, you deal 5 damage. It does give you a huge advantage in the fight, but shooting the Tracking Dart and then swapping back to a weapon, it's not the most optimal thing in the world. I would love to see it changed. Personally, as crazy as this sounds, if you were to buff the Tracking Dart, I say let it do headshot damage. And hear me out here, right? If the Tracking Dart was able to do headshot damage, not only should I think personally it should triple the damage, so it goes from 5 to 15, but also doubles the duration in which you can track people. So if you headshot somebody with a Tracking Dart, you now have 30 seconds of wall hacks, which is much better than both the Sonar Grenade and the proximity sensor, and it rewards players for hitting headshots. That's my personal take. I haven't heard that put anywhere in the community yet, so if you throw that idea, if anybody wants to pass that along to Embark, tell them Combo sent you. But besides the point, I'd love to see this thing get buffed. I love my Tracking Dart, but as it stands now, definitely a B tier gadget. Alright, next up we have the Thermal Bore. And on my last tier list, I said this thing was S tier. A lot of people call me crazy, but I do think I'm going to stick it in A tier still. Thermal Bore, I still think on light is or just in general, right, other than the RPG, I think this is the safest demolition gadget in the entire game. You shoot it from any range, it gets rid of goo, it gets rid of gas, it blows up walls. It doesn't do a ton of damage to players, unlike the RPG, which of course you can see as a downside, but it's so safe. And you get 2 of them. The reload time on it doesn't take long, the cooldown on it isn't long, and if for whatever reason, right, if you absolutely need to destroy stuff on light, in my opinion, the Thermal Bore beats out the Breach Charge in basically every single scenario possible. I don't really see Embark changing it anytime soon. I see people run it quite often in my lobbies. It has good hip fire. You can also attach it to barrels if you want to do essentially a nuke, kind of like that was in Season 1. So that's another option you have. So once again, very versatile, pretty easy to use, really no downsides at all. other than maybe you have to give up a gadget like Vanishing Bomb or Gateway, but that's why it's in A tier and not S tier, because most people aren't going to give up Vanishing Bomb for Thermal Bore. But if you need it, it's there, it's really powerful, and for those reasons, for me, it's going to be A tier. Alright, next up we have Thermal Vision. This is a very niche gadget. However, because smoke is becoming more popular this season, Thermal Vision, still thinking about the bore there. Thermal Vision is seeing a lot more use. So for me, I'm going to stick it in B tier. I think this is similar to the Tracking Dart. In the situations in which it does very well, there's really not a ton of counterplay, because you sit in a Smoke Grenade, unless somebody else is also using it, you basically have no way for your enemy to shoot you, unless they get lucky or they're using something explosive. I do think the setup for it is kind of annoying. Personally, I think they should just completely do away with the tablet. I think if I just press the button to go thermal, I should just do it. I don't think I should have to pull out a tablet. I think that's really cumbersome and I think kind of stupid. So personally, if they were to get rid of that and it was just like on and off, dude, I'd stick in A tier. But for me personally, maybe it's a skill issue, could be wrong. Having to pull out the gadget, then activate it, and also deactivating it is super annoying, and I think kind of takes away from it. But for those reasons, once again, it is really strong, and because smoke is becoming more popular, naturally the Thermal Bore is going to be a better gadget. But as we'll see later, I still don't think smoke is necessarily like super strong. But yeah, Thermal Bore, definitely better than it was, can be really good if you know how to use it. So for those reasons, I'm going to stick it in B tier. Alright, next up we have the Sonar Grenade. I'm going to stick this one right in S tier. It's throwable wall hacks. I mean, it is the most rewarding gadget in the entire game for, other than maybe the Dome Shield, with the least amount of effort required to, achieve results, right? If I think an enemy's in a building, if I was using the Tracking Dart, I'd have to line it up, actually hit the shot, and of course I have wall hacks on them. Or I could take a Sonar Grenade, which, is super easy to throw, and actually activates in mid-air. So even if I throw it crazy, I might still tag somebody, and it sits there and lingers, and these things are super hard to find, to shoot, and it hits people through walls. You don't even need line of sight, like at all. You just chuck it, don't need line of sight, unlike the proc sensor, and you see people. Super crazy. I don't really know how to put it, but I'm kind of getting sick of every 2 steps I take getting tagged by these things. I think what balances the other, recon gadgets is the fact that you need line of sight for them to work. So if it were me personally to nerf this thing, I think you throw it, it can still go through walls, but you get one pulse, one big ass pulse that you can see people through walls for a second, keep it with 2 charges, keep it with the cooldown it's at, but give it one pulse and make it a skill shot. Because as it stands now, you just get way too much information for just chucking it out there. So for me, Sonar Grenade, definitely S tier. One of the best gadgets in the game, especially for benefiting the team. But yeah, don't think that's a shocker. Of course, let me know if you disagree in the comments, but for me, Sonar Grenade is going to be S tier. Alright, next up we have the motion sensor, and this one's really good. Of course, you do need line of sight, but if targets are within line of sight and you're good at hiding these, you have permanent wall hacks on the enemy team. The cooldown on these are also really short, and you get 2 charges. So for me personally, I'm going to stick these in A tier. These are really good for heavies, especially because you have a lot of weapons that benefit from seeing targets through walls, and of course every weapon is going to benefit from that. But for something like the minigun, as I showed off in my video, you can throw one of these down, and then you can preemptively fire a target, which kind of negates one of the weaknesses, which is the spinning up. On Sledgehammer, you can break down a wall and maybe hit a target in the process. And once again, these are really good for just having eyes on an objective, and because they don't have a limited time duration, if your enemy doesn't want you to see them, they have to, 1, find it and then shoot it, which can obviously disrupt people and force them to kind of play your game. And once again, if you have 2 of them down and then you have 2 in reserve, you essentially have 4. And if you know what you're doing and place these things, and you're doing good at maintaining the cooldowns on them, you can basically maintain like permanent wall hacks on your enemy. So for those reasons, motion sensor very powerful. I think for me, it's a definitely an A tier pick. Alrighty, next up we have the Smoke Grenade, which I'm going to stick in D tier. Oh no, combo, you freaking idiot. Not just so I can have something in D tier. I do have a reason for this. Smoke Grenades are really good, and they do get rid of fire. They block turrets, which are really cool. But unlike Flash Grenades, where you chuck it and maybe you screw it up and you hit a teammate, Smoke Grenades linger. And once again, even at those high skill lobbies, which you're not really seeing these used at unless they're using Thermal Vision, which is of course a more niche pick that can be powerful. Once again, thermal vision counters it. If you chuck these down, you know, in a room and you kind of screwed up, or maybe it hit some debris, which is common in this game because things are breaking all the time, and you block the sight line from your teammates, who are you helping, right? In my opinion, I think the smoke grenade is the most selfish gadget in the game. It's good for you, once again, going back to that thermal vision, but it's so bad for your teammates. It's so disruptive. It's so annoying. It doesn't really help one team more than the other. And at this point, you could say, well, maybe my teammate's using a motion sensor and we can see the enemy, but they can't see us. But let's be honest here, man. If we're playing a competitive setting, every single team is running some kind of recon gadget to where we can see people through smoke. And every single build has access to them. You know, lights have sonar grenades, motion sensors on medium and heavy both counter the smoke grenade. And, you know, for some reason, if your team isn't running those and the other team is, but you happen to chuck down a smoke grenade, you have now hurt your team and helped the enemy team. So for those reasons, you know, I know it sounds crazy to have Flashbang in A tier and Smoke in D, but once again, Flashbang, shorter cooldowns, shorter penalty for flashing your teammates, and really there's just not many situations where the smoke is going to be something you absolutely need. So in my opinion, maybe I'm just a smoke grenade hater, I'm going to have to stick it in D tier. Also, we have Stun Gun here, which is going to go in S tier because it's the best gadget in the game. No, I'm joking. Stun Gun is obviously not enabled, so we're not going to rank that. But back to the smoke grenade. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm sure I'm going to get some flack for this one, but I do stand by it. But I am willing to be persuaded if you can tell me why you think it's actually really good. So let me know in the comments. Alrighty, people, and as you can see here, we have our completed list. I'd like to think this is a pretty good representation of, you know, what gadgets you're seeing most commonly in a competitive setting. Of course, this is a opinionated video, and, you know, this is obviously limited to my experience in game and also my personal playstyle, so keep that in mind before you flame me in the comments. But also, I want to hear your thoughts on this. If you just go in the comments and say, hey, Combo, you're retarded, or hey, this guy doesn't know ranked. I mean, it is what it is. I'd like to hear why. I don't really get offended by that stuff because it's the internet. That's what people do. That's why we love it. But please, if you're gonna disagree, you know, tell me why. Because I do think that's the important part about this is if we're gonna argue, we want it to be collaborative, right? Look up the definition for argumentation. It's a collaborative process, and I think we lose that a lot. So the point of this video is, of course, for me to share what I think is good, but I also want it to be an open mic for you guys so you can share your experience as well, and hopefully we can come to a more educated conclusion by the end of it. Alright guys, thank you so much for coming and watching. This has been Combo. Stay home, stay safe, and yeah, peace out everybody. Later.